Let's begin the test solutions videos with test number 2, first passage, which is numbers 1 to 11. Librarians help navigate in the digital age. In recent years, public libraries in the United States have experienced reducing in their operating funds due to cuts imposed at the federal, state, and local government levels. Got a grammar question here. Notice when we read this, it didn't sound quite right. It's not that they have experienced reducing. We're looking for more of a noun here. Rather than just reducing. So when we look at the choices, we have reductions, which is a nice noun that would work here, proper word, right? In the United States have experienced reductions in their operating fund, so that's pretty good. Deducting, kind of the same problem as reducing. If reducing isn't going to be right, then deducting isn't going to be right. And then deducts is not a noun. Deductions would be a noun, I guess, but that probably wouldn't be the right word either. Deducts is a verb, so we can get rid of that, and we would go with choice B. This is an example of a diction question. You got to pick the right word for the job, and in this case, that is choice B. Number 2. However, library staffing has been cut by almost 4% since 2008, and the demand for librarians continues to decrease, even though half of public libraries report that they have an insufficient number of staff to meet their patrons' needs. Okay, let's stop there. This is one of those opening word questions, and we have to ask, is however the proper word in this context? And notice the first sentence talks about how public libraries have experienced cuts in their budgets. So to say, however, library staffing has been cut, basically is not going to be correct because we don't want to show contrast. This isn't saying, you know, they've had cuts in their budgets, however, they then cut their staff. That should be more of a cause and effect relationship, something like a therefore or a thus or something of that variety, not something that shows contrast like choice A, however, or choice C, nevertheless. Both of those are contrast choices. Previously is not going to be quite right either because this is not indicating that this is previous to anything. In fact, it's really more of a consequence of these cuts. It would come after the cuts as a result of them. So consequently shows that cause and effect relationship. When we say consequently, we're basically saying as a result of the cuts that were discussed in the previous sentence, library staffing has been cut. So for this reason, we'll go with B. Let's keep on reading and try number 3. Employment in all job sectors in the United States is projected to grow by 14% over the next decade, yet the expected growth rate for librarians is predicted to be only 7%, or half of the overall rate. This trend, combined with the increasing accessibility of information via the internet, has led some to claim that librarianship is in decline as a profession. So let's stop there. We'll look at the choices here. Looking at the original, looks like we're good to have a verb here. Adding a which have or which has is going to create a fragment. Let's look at, for example, D. This trend, combined with the increasing accessibility of information via the internet, which has led some to claim that librarianship is in decline as a profession, fragment. We have no main sentence, no main verb there if we add in the which. So we can get rid of C and D for that reason. Notice if I temporarily cross out the stuff in the commas to read the sentence without that non-essential information, it makes it even clearer that something like D won't work. This trend, which has led some to claim that librarianship is in a decline as a profession, what, right? Fragment. So we're down to A and B. A is has, B is have. This looks to be some sort of subject-verb agreement issue. We have to ask, is this the proper subject-verb agreement? Has is singular. What has led some to claim? Well, it's the trend, which is also singular. Here's our subject, here's our verb. And singular, singular matches up. So we're actually okay with the original choice A. Let's pick up where we left off. As public libraries adapt to rapid technological advances in information distribution, librarians' roles are actually expanding. The share of library materials, that is in non-print formats, is increasing steadily. In 2010, at least 18.5 million ebooks were available for them to circulate. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 4. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following information: ebooks, audio and video materials, and online journals. Should the writer make this addition here? Well, notice we're talking in the sentence about the share of library materials in non-print formats. So it would seem to make sense to indicate specifically which types of non-print materials we're talking about. If we're comparing these things to the typical print books, what kinds of non-print formats are we talking about? So this seems to be relevant information. It's on topic, it fits within the flow, it gives us some necessary information that helps us understand what's going on here. So I think yes. So for that reason, let's get rid of C and D. No, because it interrupts the flow of the sentence by supplying irrelevant information. No, this is very relevant information. No, because it weakens the focus of the passage by discussing a subject other than librarians. Notice this paragraph is talking about a subject other than librarians, right? The share of library materials. Sure, on one level it is going to go back to the librarians, but this is all part of the overall argument. So for that reason, I think we can get rid of no's. So how about A? Yes, because it provides specific examples of the materials discussed in the sentence. Yeah, for sure. Yes, because it illustrates the reason for the increase mentioned later in the sentence. I don't think this gives us a reason for the increase. That doesn't seem to make any sense. This is just describing the kinds of resources that have increased. So we'll go with choice A. So let's reread this. The share of library materials that is in non-print formats is increasing steadily. In 2010, at least 18.5 million ebooks were available for them to circulate. So this is a bit confusing. For whom to circulate? This is an example of an ambiguous pronoun. I guess it's referring to the librarians, I suppose, but there's no librarians in the sentence, and it's just super confusing as to what that them is referring to. So A is gone, B is gone for the same reason, to be circulated by them. By whom? I guess librarians, but it's unclear. How about C? In 2010, at least 18.5 million ebooks were available for their circulating. That's a bit awkward and wordy. How about D? At least 18.5 million ebooks were available for circulation. There we go. Notice in D, compared to the other choices, it's nice and concise. It gets the point across, and it eliminates the ambiguity by getting rid of the thems, which are unclear. So this one is D. Number 6. As a result, librarians must now be proficient curators of electronic information, compiling, catalog, and updating these collections. Notice we have a list of actions. They have to be able to do compiling, updating, and catalog. No, we want this to be in the same form. This is a parallelism question. So we're looking for something like cataloging so that they all end in ing in this list. So looking at the choices, we like D for that reason. We don't like B because there's no reason to add librarians here. We've already established that it's the librarians doing this thing, so we can get rid of B. To catalog is not going to be parallel because we need it to have an ing. We don't want it in this infinitive form, so we're going to go with choice D. Number 7. But perhaps even more importantly, librarians function as first responders for their community's computer needs. Since one of the fastest growing library services is public access to computer use, there is great demand for computer instruction. In fact, librarians' training now includes courses on research and internet search methods, many of whom teach classes in internet navigation, database and software use, and digital information literacy. So in this question, number 7, we want to combine these sentences. Notice in the original, which isn't a choice, but just to note, this part of the sentence, or this sentence, is actually a fragment. It's not a complete sentence at all. So here we want to combine them grammatically, but also in the ways that make sense with the flow and the argument of the passage. So let's go through each of these choices. In fact, librarians' training now includes courses on research and internet search methods. Many librarians teach classes in internet navigation, database and software use, and digital information literacy is taught by them. So everything was great until this last portion. We've already established that the librarians are doing this teaching, so we don't want to then say taught by them because that's redundant. So A was close, but it falls apart towards the end. B. In fact, many librarians whose training now includes courses on research and internet search methods teach classes in internet navigation, database and software use, and digital information literacy. So B looks pretty good. It talks about their training. It talks about the classes they teach. It's one nice, complete, intact sentence, no fragments or other redundancies. So B's looking pretty good. But as always, we check all 4 choices. C. Training now includes courses on research and internet search methods. Many librarians, in fact, are teaching classes in internet navigation, database and software use, and digital information literacy. Here, it's not clear at all who is doing this training. training now includes courses on research. Like, who is training? Is it the librarians who are being trained? And indeed, it is the librarians who are being trained. It's just super unclear that that's who it is in this case. We need that to be crystal clear, which we see much better in choice B. Otherwise, it's not a terrible choice, but I think B is just more direct with who's being trained. So we can get rid of C. D, including courses on research and internet search methods in their training is, in fact, why many librarians teach classes in internet navigation, blah, blah, blah. So D is just very, very bad. Very unclear, wordy, strange construction of the including courses on these things is, in fact, why librarians teach classes. It's introducing a kind of cause and effect that we didn't see in the original. So best choice here is going to be B. Nice and concise, combines the sentences together nicely, doesn't lose any information, and is logical. So we go with choice B. While these classes are particularly helpful to young students developing basic research skills, but adult patrons can also benefit from librarian assistance in that they can acquire job-relevant computer skills. Here we begin with a dependent clause known as the subordinating conjunction while. While these classes are particularly helpful to young students, ... Once we've done that, we have our comma to introduce our main sentence. We do not need a conjunction. We do not need a coordinating fanboys conjunction to connect this subordinate and independent clause. So probably what we need to do is just get rid of it. So we like choice D. A, B, and C are all forms of the coordinating conjunction, right? The fanboys, we don't need any of them. It's not an issue of logic. It's an issue of structure. We don't need them, so we'll just delete it. And that's choice D. Free to all who utilize their services, public libraries and librarians are especially valuable because they offer free resources that may be difficult to find elsewhere, such as help with online job searches, as well as resume and job material development. So number 9, which choice most effectively sets up the examples given at the end of the sentence? Notice the question is asking for something very specific. Which choice most effectively sets up the examples at the end of the sentence? And the examples at the end of the sentence are about online job searches, resume, job material development. So it's something to do with jobs, something to do with losing your job, trying to find a job, putting together a resume to do it. So whatever choice we're looking at should have to do with that. So we look at the original, free to all who utilize their services. It's not terrible, at least it's, I guess, telling us that they're free, though note we already mentioned that they're free, so maybe it's a bit of a redundancy in choice A. But more importantly, it doesn't satisfy the question. It doesn't actually introduce or set up what's going on later in the sentence. How about B? During periods of economic recession. Aha, this is setting up the idea that during these periods of economic recession, these libraries would be useful for those people who want to, say, work on their resume or find jobs or whatever they would have to do to get a job, right? Maybe learn something. So this sets up why these people would use the library in this way. It's more specific, focused on this economic aspect. Although their value cannot be measured, public libraries and librarians are especially valuable. That's a very odd pairing of the sentences, considering we're saying that they are valuable, and then we say their value cannot be measured. It's a bit strange. Also, more importantly, it doesn't have anything to do with the end of the sentence examples that we looked at. When it comes to the free services libraries provide, again, redundant. We've already established that they provide free resources later in the sentence. Doesn't say anything about the economic aspects, the jobs. So best answer here is going to be choice B. An overwhelming number of public libraries also report that they provide help with electronic government resources related to income taxes, law troubles, and retirement programs. So we see law troubles, and this is an issue of tone, or perhaps more specifically diction. Law troubles is not quite how we would put this issue. It's a little too informal. It's quite vague, actually. We like something like legal issues. I like that a lot better. Legal issues is much more standard as to what you would say rather than law troubles. Let's check the others. Concerns related to law courts or matters for the law courts. D is just way too formal, way too stuffy and wordy. And C, concerns related to law courts, is just vague. We're looking for legal issues, right? Legal problems of some kind. So, or legal questions. So that goes better with choice B, more concise and better word choice in that context. Last question. In sum, the internet does not replace the need for librarians, and librarians are hardly obsolete. Like books, librarians have been around for a long time, but the internet is extremely useful for many types of research. So which ends the passage with a restatement of the writer's primary claim. So looking at this original, this is not the primary claim of the passage, that librarians have been around for a long time and the internet is extremely useful. Sure, that stuff is true, but the main idea is that librarians and libraries are super useful even in an era of electronic communication and electronic information. So for that reason, we can get rid of A. Let's look at the rest. Although their roles have diminished significantly, librarians will continue to be employed by public libraries for the foreseeable future. This is contradicted by the passage. The passage says that their roles are, if anything, changing, not really going away, but just changing. They have different things they need to learn, different things they need to teach. A lot of what they do is more internet related now. So their roles are not diminishing significantly. That's a bit too negative for what the author is arguing. The growth of electronic information has led to a diversification of librarians' skills and services, positioning them as savvy resource specialists for patrons. Yeah, this is the whole point of the passage, that sure, the internet is a big deal and it's maybe eliminating some traditional forms of knowledge, but it opens up other opportunities for librarians to be helpful. However, given their extensive training and skills, librarians who have been displaced by budget cuts have many other possible avenues of employment. It's not saying at all that, librarians are going to get jobs elsewhere. Just the opposite, that there are plenty of jobs or at least enough jobs or a lot of jobs in libraries for librarians, even in this digital age. So for that one, we're going to put C because that best fits the overall argument of the passage.